Hello and welcome to the Rubber Duck Dev Show. I'm Chris.
And I'm Kristen.
And I'm Kevin.
And today we've got a really fun show with you. We've actually got two topics that we're going to talk about today, but we've got Kevin Fischer here with us all the way from Germany. He was nice enough to give up some time to be with us today, and we are excited to talk to him. I am really excited because any of you who are on the DragonRuby Discord kind of know that every time the testing topic comes up, Kevin and I usually get tagged in that, and people want to know what we think about it and get some insights. So we're kind of the test buddies on Discord, I guess. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. Palantir, which is a kind of an inspector, but I would consider that a tool for testing. I mean, that's really kind of the main thrust I would use something like that for. And then we'll talk about some testing stuff. Hey, Levi, welcome to the stream. So we are first, before we get into the fun coffee chat, we'll do week in review. How was your week, Creston?
Bloody spammers!
Yeah, right.
They continue to pummel my service, even though I'm like blocking, and so much of it is like I've blocked, I don't know, like 15, 20,000 IP addresses. And I don't want to necessarily put all of that in the IP tables firewall. So, I mean, it's essentially in a database now, and I've tried to minimize the impact, but they're still coming after me. So I'm just like,
Yeah.
Please just stop. So that's one thing. The other side, I guess this is a week of frustration. The other side of it is I'm working with two different clients. I may be working with a third now, doing database upgrades, Postgres database upgrades. And these are multi-terabyte databases. So trying to do any sort of a test takes forever, meaning like the actual upgrade process is pretty quick, but if you want to test a full amount of data, getting a new one in sync, like I started something this morning and it's 60% done. So it's like it'll take 12 hours to get one replica in sync. And this particular test, I need 3 replicas to test out. So that's 3 days of where very little work gets done other than just waiting for the system to be in a state to test. So anyway, those are just some of my frustrations, but how about you?
So I got I'm actually doing a kind of a march towards our Rails upgrade. I'm having to go through and kind of get a bunch of other gems upgraded before we actually switch the Rails version in our gem file. So that's kind of my fun week this week. But I also, there was a an article in, I think, Ruby Weekly, one of the newsletters that I get, about strategies to remove dead code from your Ruby app. And that was something I'd actually been thinking about lately, because as Ruby apps get old, they tend to get very big, and a lot of features that were experimental or things that nobody uses anymore, and that code just hangs around for years and years. So, I talked to the leadership today, and I was like, hey, you guys should read this article and let's start checking out these gems. They were talking about Coverband and Debride as some gems to kind of help you get a handle on what code is dead and what can you start getting out of there. So that's a fun, I kind of like the whole refactor and clean up and get rid of the cruft times in my development cycle. So kind of excited about that. Should be fun. So Kevin, how about you? How's your week?
Oh, I had a quite nice week back in Germany. I'm now here with my wife and 9-month-old boy.
Nice.
Grandparents seeing him for the first time since I usually live in Japan. And it's the first time since Corona and everything happened. So we had a nice week adjusting from the jet lag, relaxing, seeing my parents and all kinds of things. So yes, it was
That's
really
great.
nice.
Well, I really appreciate you taking time out of your vacation and family visit to come hang out with us. That's really gracious of you, and we appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, James and Sire, welcome to the show. How you guys doing? Glad you're here. All right, so let's talk first about Palantir. So here we are with Palantir. This is a tool that you wrote. So kind of give us a little bit about what is Palantir and why did you write this?
So Palantir, well, the first topic of discussion might be probably how to pronounce that thing. I'm not 100% sure myself.
Palantir, Palantir.
Yes, according to Sir Ian McKellen, it's Palantir, but in my mind it's always Palantir, like more Germanish, but call it whatever you like, whatever you feel comfortable. So this is a tool for the DragonRuby game engine, which I guess is often featured on your streams, Coding with Chris. So the viewers might be familiar with that. And there's this state data structure inside this game engine, which is recommended to use by the engine creators. And usually, I don't know, when you try to debug something real time, like games, what usually happens is you put many put statements in your code and you open the console and you have like 60 times a second, lots of text, and you try to somehow pass the stuff out of it that gives you the trouble right at the moment. And I was thinking, how can I don't know, solve this thing, don't spam my console. So I thought, hey, I want to have some kind of inspector. I'm not sure where I was inspired by that. Probably a little bit by Unity and their inspectors, where you have game objects and you can see live while playing into their state. So that is definitely a little inspiration. So basically what this does is it connects to a game and it shows the current state, which you can then browse into. Like you can open the hashes and arrays and whatever and objects, and then look at the values at the current time. And you can even watch some state which you want to keep an eye on, your player HP or whatever, and then see, you play a little bit and see, oh, this has a strange value right now. So I don't know. And that might help you with debugging.
Yeah, and so this is once I get a little further into my project, I'm very keen to use this because, you know, the thing I'm working on is kind of a having little pawns that are autonomous. So I have to keep track of the states that they're in, and are they changing states in the right time and all that. And this will be way better than put statements. So I'm really looking forward to kind of using this. So this is actually a separate window that runs. It's not embedded in DragonRuby itself. It connects to into your game from outside, right?
Yes, that's true. It's also written actually in DragonRuby, so it's basically a DragonRuby game / application. Yes, that was the most comfortable I had right at hand when I was writing, and I was learning DragonRuby myself, and I thought, hey, why not? And the APIs were there to do this kind of thing technically. But yes, you're right. It's a separate application from the game.
Right. And so I know there's a lot of libraries out there and starting to get more and more for DragonRuby, but I haven't seen a lot that actually tap into a running DragonRuby game from outside. There may be others out there, but this is the only one that I've run into so far. Now, granted, I'm a baby DragonRubyist, but so I'm very intrigued by the possibilities of that kind of architecture with things. Have you thought about that kind of external architecture for other kinds of things that would be useful for DragonRuby?
That's only in passing, maybe. I'm quite busy still with Palantir and seeing how I could extend it. I have some ideas how this could be extended into different kinds of debug helping applications. Other than that, I don't know. Your imagination is the limit. I have not thought about it so much. to be
Levi
honest.
says puts for life. Come on, Levi. We're gonna have to work on converting these non-testing Luddites in the Discord to the real way of thinking, right? So I love picking on Levi when he comes on the stream. He's fun. So because one of the things that I started thinking, because you and I, and this is kind of a segue into our next little segment on testing, but you and I have had some pretty in-depth discussions about testing on the Discord and discussions with other folks, and I know that your typical testing structure is the inbuilt test unit stuff in DragonRuby is where you usually test, whereas I'm typically testing in RSpec because I come from a Rails background and that's what I was comfortable with. I don't need your fancy schmancy tests. I push to master and hope nothing breaks. Well, you do you, Levi.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah, it's your game, man. But I started wondering because I'm not actually using stuff that's embedded into DragonRuby, because DragonRuby doesn't have a gem functionality, so I can't bring RSpec in there. I'm using kind of a hybrid system, which I use RSpec to test the business logic objects, but I can't really test game states and things like that you can do in test unit. But then I started wondering after I was looking through Palantir. Sorry, Tolkien. But
confused you.
But after I was looking at this awesome tool, I started thinking about, well, if he can tap into the game state from outside, would it be possible to make like RSpec test helpers for DragonRuby, like a library of test helpers that for RSpec that could tap into that and extend its usefulness? So it was a thought that I had, but I was thinking, well, there obviously are ways to watch and inspect game state from outside, which I hadn't thought about until I saw this tool here.
Well, so speaking of that, how is that done out of curiosity?
How is that done? So DragonRuby is actually, while in development mode on your local machine, is actually running a local HTTP server with some debug endpoints. And one of them is, and I as a web developer and you two as web developers, I'm shuddering at the thought, but it's true. It's an Ruby eval endpoint as one of them. And that is basically how Palantir works.
But
I'm
that's
sending
not so...
regular requests to DragonRuby, to the running game, telling it, hey, give me all your state, serialize it a little bit because there's crazy stuff like circular references and stuff like this, which need to be untangled again when I go here on Palantir side and stuff like this. And I do that, I don't know, 6 times a second, as much as it can handle.
Right.
Yes. So that's what works.
Okay.
And I think that's actually pretty ingenious to take something so simple and turn it into something so useful. And I think
I'm not sure if you've seen Amir's videos on the iPhone development or the, I don't know, Steam Deck. Probably recently has also some videos on that. I mean, he's using that kind of HTTP server to hot load code remotely without having to deploy his stuff. That is ingenious.
Yeah.
So there's many things you can do with a hot loaded Ruby virtual machine that is accessible via an HTTP server.
Yeah. And so you've kind of opened some doors, some thinking doors for me about, okay, I've got this RSpec hybrid system, but can I get it even closer to DragonRuby? We may have to have some sidebars about that in the Discord, because that's an idea I'd be interested in pursuing a bit. Because for me, I know that would be very useful.
Ahead. So out of curiosity, is this type of thing where if you're like playing your game I'm not that familiar with DragonRuby, but if you're playing it in development mode, like on a Steam Deck from another system, can you actually um, plug in using Palantir to read what's going on the
At the moment,
Steam Deck build or something like that?
Theoretically, it's definitely possible. At the moment, it's totally fixed on the local host with the local port, so
Okay.
it can only connect to the local running game. But that's easy to implement, definitely. So to add some kind of option and say Steam Deck and enter your IP there, and then it should definitely be able to connect to that one and watch that state.
Yeah. Of course, with it being an eval, you kind of got to be a little careful about how open you do it.
Yes, that is
that can get messy really fast if you're not careful with that. So as we segue into testing, and this is kind of the big topic for today. As I said, you and I have had several conversations about testing and conversations with other folks about that. But for anybody watching this who hasn't kind of heard your views on testing, what are your general views on like testing, test-driven development? You know, how important is it to game development?
I like testing. That, first of all, I like testing. I like test-driven development. I like how it forces you to think about your design and about how all the pieces work together and what kind of public interface you want before actually implementing the thing. It forces you to think before doing and would like to do just code away so often, which is also fun. And especially in game development, when you do some prototyping and trying out stuff and jiggling around with that game mechanic to make it feel nicer, that is probably not a point where tests are so useful. The thing where tests, in my opinion, for game development are definitely very useful is any simulation kind of thing. I mean, I have yet to imagine a game where there's not at least some kind of simulation. Basically, it's player gives input, you have some state, and you have your world, however simple it looks like two Pong thingies.
Yeah.
And then it does something with your input, makes the next state, and then, I don't know, renders something from that. Though those are clear responsibilities, each of them, which can technically be tested. I mean, especially if you have a complex game like the one, what are they called? Cave Lords, I think, like which goes into the direction of like Dwarf Fortress, I guess, with lots of intelligent agents and probably lots of craziness. I don't know, like rain is falling and then suddenly it's steaming and then that kills the bat because it doesn't like steam because it's asthma or something.
Right.
Like these kind of interactions.
See, now I have to program that feature. Yeah. So any game you have is going, no matter, like you said, no matter how simple it is going to have some kind of logic somewhere in it. And any kind of logic can be tested. And I think part of our discussion on the Discord is, and with some of these guys that are in chat now too, I think Levi said something about this, is that, you know, like if you're doing game jams or something, that's probably not a time to do testing. You know, you're in a hurry, and B, you're just doing it for fun. It's not like you're gonna it's not like you're making a big project that you need to be able to support and refactor and all this stuff. You're just, you know, throwing the hammer and duct tape at it. So that's probably not the best time for tests. But I would, my opinion, and I think from talking to you, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but our opinions are that if you're going to do something that's kind of production level, tests are a good idea because it prevents you from breaking things. It reduces your stress. It allows you to make things better without making them worse first. So what other kinds of things do you see that can be tested in DragonRuby? Because, you know, me testing in the RSpec, I'm just testing the like the logic objects, right? The data objects. But since you test inside the the DragonRuby, what kind of things do you test in your games?
To be honest, I probably don't test so many different things from what you test, other than that I can actually use those, I don't know, the convenient DragonRuby APIs. I don't know. I saw it was on one of your first streams. I saw you struggle with some kind of different, I don't know what it was, some kind of different hash function that needed to be implemented differently on DragonRuby and on CRuby, and and like this kind of little API things that don't work, or convenient functions that just inside DragonRuby, and having that at hand and being able to use that in your test without having to write a lot of mocks or replacements on the aspect side. That's definitely one advantage. One disadvantage is definitely you don't have aspect and it's DSL, until somebody writes it.
Oh, true.
Dragon spec is waiting to be written.
There you go. Maybe that's where
you have enough projects on your table already.
I do, but there's a big DragonRuby community out there, and I've had a couple of people ask me about how do you do the RSpec thing, because what I've started to see is that there's a lot of people coming into DragonRuby from a Ruby or Ruby and Rails background instead of a game development background. So they're used to things like RSpec, so they start trying to find the things that they're comfortable with, which is how I got there, right? I was comfortable with RSpec, so how do I do testing in DragonRuby? And I said, well, RSpec is my thing, so how do I get that to work? Probably wasn't the best approach, but it was the one I was comfortable with. And so I think if we can get things like that are comfortable for people now that are coming from this RSpec type background, it'll help them. And so I think you're right, that may be a good idea, is to get something like a Dragon spec that has an RSpec type DSL in it, so that those people can transition into that. Because personally, I really, my brain just does not absorb test unit syntax. I don't get along with test unit stuff.
It's not even test unit. It's just some kind of simple assert true basic function and maybe 2 or 3 other variations of that. And then it writes many functions that start with test underbar. It's definitely inspired by test unit, but it's not actually test unit.
Right.
So but it's a very simplistic kind of thing. But it does the work. It shows that you asserted. It shows how many passed and how many failed. And yes, it does not return in -1 on 1 exit code. That's a little bit sad if you want to do stuff like CI, but you can work around that too.
Yeah.
Or bug Amir until it's fixed. I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, bugging Amir is kind of a favorite pastime of a lot of people anyway.
Oh, so. And he's here. Hello, Amir.
Speaking of, he's here.
All right, so let's talk to chat a little bit. So Levi, a genuine question for once. I think this is your very first one, Levi. What value does a test bring when the value you are comparing a quality to is basically just the implementation of the method verbatim? Well, what do you think, Kevin?
Oh, that is a very, very good question. I like that question, because that probably expressed my own personal struggle with testing and test-driven development until, I don't know, maybe really only 2 or 3 years ago, when I really got to somehow, I don't know, I watched some good talks on the topic and some people who reframed it properly for me, that I actually started to understand what is the good idea behind this thing called testing. The thing is, if you have a method that is so simple that is maybe just a plus addition or something inside, which you just hide behind the method name, and test that it really does that plus addition, I'm not sure if that is always worth testing. I mean, what I feel is really worth testing are more higher level, as I like to call them, facts about your system that you want to pin down. And how this fact that you pin down, I don't know if I had a good example now. For example, in game, you have your character is on the floor, there's a wall 100 meters right beside you, walk right, you press right all the time. At some point you will stop. That's somewhat a high level description what should happen in a game. Like it does not describe, oh, at X 200 or -10 or something, your character will stop because I put the test value right before that, exactly like that, but it's a little bit more higher level. And then you try to test that, and how you actually implement that can change. So actually separating the implementation, how it actually works, from the fact that you want to test. That is a difficult thing, a mind shift, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
And you should not be forced to test definitely every function you wrote, right? Like the important public or whatever, wherever it faces to the important part facing APIs, the functions that, what is called, specify your system's behavior or your game's behavior. Yes.
Yeah.
Not sure if that's helpful, but ask me on Discord and let's talk about that more to get maybe some clarity in that.
Yeah, and I can see, you know, it's nice to see. I can tell when you start talking about that, you're really excited about testing, and you really think deeply about what should I test, how should I test, and that, which I like, because I'm kind of the same way. But you know, you're right. And I have a tendency, I'll use testing to kind of help me think through, because RSpec's DSL is so kind of English like, I will just start saying things in RSpec and then writing stuff until it works. So I'll use very low level RSpec thinking, and then I'll go back and get rid of that and encapsulate that into kind of a top level test. But I also use it to help me develop my way through what it is I'm trying to do too. That's one of the reasons I like RSpec so much, is because the DSL lends itself to that kind of thinking. So let's see what Amir has to say. Common question I've asked is, how would you go about reasonably testing one of my games, a car that turns or the ramp collisions sample app? Super tricky to do and worth pondering on. Yes, I agree with you. Testing like game state type stuff, the front endy type things, it is tricky, and it's something I'm trying to noodle on and figure out how to do.
I'm not sure if I understand the background behind this question always 100% correctly, but this is, I think I've heard this question before, especially the ramp question thing. Like it's like a finicky physics problem where there's many edge cases and many crazy things that can happen. Stuff tunneling through the little edge of two colliders that are just 1 pixel apart, and crazy stuff like this.
Right.
You use tests to pin those cases down, I would say, and assert that it will not break, that it will work. But it does not help you write the actual thing. It will be a finicky I mean, that is, at least in my experience, I mean, the actual information, how to do it, the low-level thing, like, oh, I have so many if statements and so complex, maybe object behavior that's working together to actually simulate this physics thing, and the high-level behavior that we want to assert, that are two very different levels of where we're talking about, and how to actually implement that is difficult. I mean, writing a good test is a good step to build step by step the whole system, but writing the system itself is a whole different difficulty that the test will not directly help you with, I would say.
Yeah.
And you still have to write it somehow.
Yeah, and there are it is kind of a learning process to go through and figure out what's worth testing and what can I even test. Like one of the things I learned to do is I kind of test the happy path and leave the edge cases for, if I have time, I'll write a test for it, or if a bug crops up, and usually this is how my test suite gets filled out, is when I have a bug, okay, I'll write a test to reproduce that bug, and then that bug will never come back. But I don't try to test every edge case up front. I usually will test the happy path, and then the suite will fill itself in from there as things go across. So Levi said his question came from some of Chris's tests being just expect function to equal the return of the function. Yes, that is not actually good for a test suite. But as I was kind of explaining before, those type of tests I use to kind of help me think through, okay, I need something that will return this. Let me write a test and then go write a function that does that. So typically those tests in my test suite will end up going away because those are just my thinking through tests. Let's get the basic blocks in place. So, I mean, fair criticism. And yeah, I don't touch on that much in the Coding with Chris, but those tests are just there for helping me think out loud more than anything else.
I mean, it's one type of feedback loop. I mean, if you're very comfortable with writing tests quickly and spinning that up, then I don't know, some people write the Ruby code directly, then open IRB and then require the file and then enter some test function and see if it works correctly. And a test is doing the same thing and automatically. And then just making sure that what you just wrote actually works in the way you expect it, even if it might be very simple. Yeah, that is also a different kind of, I mean, it's your kind of feedback loop that you are comfortable with.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's just something that I learned to do over my career, is that was how my brain worked. It liked to work that way. So Levi, an example of the test. Yeah, you're exactly right, Levi. That's not, I wouldn't advise leaving tests like that in your test suite for the long haul. They should be kind of consolidated up into integration type tests. Testing, like, as Kevin said, kind of the story of what you want this thing to do, not that this function returns a thing, unless that function has something weird going on, but then maybe you want to rewrite your function. So Amir says, yeah, big believer in culling tests afterwards. And again, I think that has a lot to do with how somebody thinks. That happens to be the way I think and approach testing, but you also want to be careful that your test suite doesn't get too big or you stop using it.
I think Amir was writing something about the that you can still read it 2 weeks later. That is definitely also a thing. Wait, what is this?
Yeah, he has he gave an example. Video shows how change a single condition drastically affects the collision behavior. And this is just collision physics logic. Yeah, I'd say physics is probably a really hard thing to test. Not even UI rendering, because of all the edge cases. Yeah.
There's two things to that, I would say. One thing is some people are proponents, or I mean, I can understand, like, don't put too much logic into your tests themselves. Like, keep your tests simple and stupid. So, but there is a limit to that, I would say, and there's a point, especially when you try to assert higher level, maybe even acceptance test kind of things, where it's really worth, in my opinion, to invest in a kind of DSL, maybe higher level preparation, setup functions for your tests that allow you to easily set up different kinds of situations that are very common and that are easily readable. Then it becomes important. Okay, this is the test that states a readable single fact about your system that you still want to understand, and investing a little bit in that architecture can be a good trade-off, definitely. In game where, I don't know, where test logic that goes over several ticks, like the physics example of the character that walks across a wall later. I have written several little DSLs that just says, okay, character walks to the right, and internally it will, I don't know, add the character horizontal velocity, give it an 1 or something to walk to the right, and then always next tick of the simulation system. And then finally assert, okay, it stopped at some point of time, like 2 ticks at the same X value, like some kind of more abstract kind of test. But
yeah, and I think, he brings up
thought has to go into that. And I'm not sure, not always the effort is maybe worth of it, especially if you want to iterate quickly. It really depends on your system and situation.
Right. And, he's talking about how to write a test that has a setup assert body that'll make sense 2 weeks later. That's something that I struggle with a lot, because when you get into code and you're flying through code, what a lot of people don't think about is is 2 weeks from now me going to remember what the hell I was thinking right here when I wrote this confusing stuff? And I use tests a lot to prevent me from falling into that trap. And that's one of the reasons I like RSpec's DSL so much, is because it's very easy to write notes for myself in the test. The tests are the documentation, right? And so, 2 weeks from now me can go back and say, what was I thinking? Well, let me look and see what the test said I was thinking. My experience has been that's easier to do in RSpec than things like test unit, because it's more language based, the DSL. But
I posted a little link in the Zoom chat, which is, it's a little bit special kind of, how do you say, domain maybe, but about test readability, or what I personally call the test readability. I don't know if you can pull that up.
Yep.
For a second.
Give me a hot
It
second
should be
here.
Public GitHub link.
That was not what I tried to copy. Why is my copy not working? There we go. All right. There we are.
So basically what this is a roguelike, basically what is it called? Turn-based, grid-based kind of 2D top-down RPG. And then there's this field of view algorithm. Like you stand behind a wall at the corner, and then you see the certain kinds of corners, like the certain kinds of squares are visible, others are in shadow, others are not visible at all. And I don't know, this kind of algorithm is quite difficult to write yourself. I don't know, there are many edge cases. And I wonder, this is quite a visual kind of domain. How can I write tests that make sense to me and that actually express without having to pass, oh, there's a big matrix of 1, 1, there's a wall, and 1, 2, there's a wall, and 3, 2. Also, what does that actually look like? It's not very visual if you just look at the coordinate numbers in your tests.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I go through the effort, and I don't know, at least the assertion of the field of view, if you scroll down a little bit more to the more complex cases, there you see the add is the player, the circle is like where a wall is, and then the X would be which tile is obscured. And so I wrote a little bit higher level abstraction on as something that my tests uses to assert. And so I have very visual and readable tests, and I can easily write new scenarios for example, I have these 2 crazy walls that don't work properly. I could easily assert them here.
That
just in a sense, or what could be possible in making your test readable.
Right.
You could
that
put
is
more
really
effort
cool
in your test assertion thing, but that is also, of course, a source of bugs. So it's like it's kind of feedback and trade-off thing. You have to see if your domain is complex enough and important enough to put in that effort, I guess.
Right. And so, but this is really cool. I like this kind of thinking, but I also like the way you've implemented this, because it's a visual way that I can look through my tests and see, well, this is what I set up. I can just see what I'm setting up right here. It's not, I don't have to decode it from words into a visual space in my head. So I really like that. And I think, when we were kind of half jokingly talking about something like DragonSpec earlier in the show, but things like this would be, I think, worth looking into, libraries that can do stuff like this. That's actually a very useful thing, I think.
It's very domain specific. It's a 2D grid that happens to be easily representable as some ASCII strings. So in this case, it worked well and is readable in this kind of ASCII representation. In Amir's case, you have probably freely placeable 2D rectangles in a coordinate space that goes in the hundreds and thousands. Doing that with just text is more difficult, definitely.
Oh,
and
sure.
This will be, and I think maybe what he might be pointing at a little bit is like this kind of what is called replay kind of regression test. So where you have this kind of visual regression test that Amir is often proposing.
Yeah, and I think
more useful in that
I
cases.
think automated testing can only go so far in the game development space. You're still going to have to do some manual testing, some replay testing, things like that, because automated testing, there are just things that it's not well suited for. You know, maybe you can get it to do it, but the effort to do that just isn't worth the payoff. So, but I think there is a lot of stuff that can be done very well with testing in DragonRuby. Because like we talked about earlier, logic, every game has some kind of logic, and that logic can be tested, and you can prevent that logic from ever regressing. There's also, how much do you use your, you know, Amir kind of brought this up. How much do you use your test suite as kind of reminder documentation for yourself of what you were thinking at the time, what you actually wanted this to do? Do you use it for that?
Reminding myself as documentation. It definitely helps remembering how stuff is supposed to work and how to use some of my objects. But I'm not sure. I couldn't say. At least the ones I use in game development. I mean, I would come back to a game after a longer time. Recently, I started working on Palantir. How do I pronounce it now myself? After a while, looking at the test was definitely very helpful for me, because the code base is somewhat big already, so it's quite, and there's a lot of tests there already. And recently I started adding some also really end-to-end acceptance tests with the very minimal, I don't know, okay, you should be able to see the state of the game. You should be able to watch a thing and it appears on the right side. You should be able to switch the theme to dark theme. And like the minimal, okay, these are the features of the app right now in the one happy case. And it really goes through, I don't know, assert the input, like really go through the input and really parse the output hashes and parse them myself into legible assertions to really have this end-to-end feel. Because sometimes, of course, we have all these unit tests, as we probably all know from experience. If you put it together, it still doesn't work. So there's still some end-to-end testing necessary.
Yeah, the integration testing cycle, I think, is important. I think actually once you get past building the building blocks, the unit testing becomes less important than the kind of end-to-end integration testing does. But I think there's another benefit here, and a lot of whether you want to use testing and how valuable it is depends, I think, on whether this is just a funsies hobby thing you're doing, or whether this is trying to be a production thing that you're doing. Because one of the other big benefits of writing tests and having a test suite is, if I bring on another developer to help me with this stuff, the test suite is a set of documentation that can train them on how the system works, and they can get ramped up a lot faster, and they can understand what the thinking is and what the desires are. But if you're just doing game jams and this is a funsies project that I like to fool around with on the weekend, that benefit doesn't exist for tests, right? Because you're never going to bring another developer in on that. I mean, maybe you'll share it with your friends, but you know, that's not, you're not really looking at it from a business production type standpoint at that point. So I think the benefits of tests, I do it because it helps keep me from being stressed out. I can, I can keep myself from being stressed because I know if I change something, I'll immediately know if it broke anything, right? Because my tests will fail. But
and then that's the main reason that I think about doing testing for anything, whether game development or not, is that so I don't break future stuff. So this is working. Let's put some tests around it, or have the test to begin with. It's okay. So this is good. The tests are there to help me prevent breaking this thing that is built in the future.
So, Kevin, what type of things would you like to see develop in the DragonRuby sphere from a testing perspective? Is there anything that you really wish would happen, or that you'd like to move forward from a specifically for DragonRuby?
Something's missing. Something that would be helpful.
Or things where you go, gosh, I really wish I had a way to test this.
Like one way that, I mean, in the Palantir channel in the Discord, sometimes then I get suggestions or scenarios of people, hey, I have this kind of situation, how can I use Palantir to help me with that? And for example, one person was saying probably they are really not interested so much often in the state at a certain moment, but in the history of things that happened up until things broke.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow thinking about, hey, how can this be properly replicated, or how can this be properly inspected? Like one way that definitely helps with that already exists are these kind of replays that the game engine can produce. So you can just say in the engine, start recording, and then it resets your game. You can just play your game, do some stuff, maybe break it along the run, and then you stop the recording, and it just, what it basically does, it just records all your inputs every frame in a simple text format, and then
you're gonna need a bigger database.
Yes, it's fortunate it's on your local hard disk and it's just text. Like each entry is, I don't know, not even a kilobyte. Like it's very, very small. Like it's really just a short Ruby array with maybe 30 characters each line, and maybe a few of them every tick. So it's still manageable. And of course, the random seed, it's also recorded. So you actually can reproduce the same thing, and not because of random stuff, it was suddenly go crazy and nothing will happen at all. So that can definitely help you. Where was I? to review the history of stuff that happened, like what happened up until a bug. And then getting that to work seamlessly. I think there's also options to like pause the tick and then move it forward one tick. I think there's some secret, not so secret, I think they're in the documentation, but there's some functions that allow you to do that in DragonRuby. And then you could probably do some stuff to then step by step see what your state was at what time, and then can see, oh, that was strange. Why did that happen? And it helps you maybe find the source of your bug. And actually, I'm working on a little bit of expansion to Palantir that takes one such replay and basically processes it, like, how do you call it? Embellishes it with the state of each tick and the visual output of each tick. That's all just Ruby data structures. Unless you do crazy object-oriented stuff, I have to take care of the edge cases a little bit. So, but for now, with simple hashes and everything, that works, definitely. It just goes through the replay one time and records all the states and all the outputs. And then you can restart your game one more time and then just go with like a sliding bar, like a play bar during the replay, and really see the game at that point in time with the state at that time. And then you have Palantir and open at the same time, and look what the state was. I'm working at the moment on such an extension, and the very first dirty prototype is actually working. Maybe I need to upload a video of that somewhere, so you might be showing it, but it's not quite ready right now. So
absolutely. I'm really interested.
Share that on the DragonRuby Discord.
Yeah.
And once that drops, Palantir will also increase in price, I guess. So well worth buy it now if you can.
Yeah. So, and I will say that yeah, guys, if you haven't already, if you're watching this, Palantir is, if you're going to be making any games of any kind of size in DragonRuby, Palantir is going to be an indispensable help to you, because I've already run into several problems just in the beginnings of my learning of DragonRuby where Palantir, had I had it up and running, would have saved me a lot of guesswork. So it's, I mean, extremely reasonable priced. So, you know, let's support Kevin. If you haven't gone and bought a a copy of Palantir yet, and you're doing DragonRuby, invest in this. It's well worth it. And as you can hear, he's making it even better. So please do go support Kevin in that.
Thanks for the promote.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's well
A little
worth
bit
it.
forced, maybe. No, thank you so much.
Thank you for the
promoting.
tool. I mean, this is important stuff. This is the kind of stuff that drives the community forward. It drives the visibility of DragonRuby and the ease of use of DragonRuby forward. It keeps developers sane because, you know, it helps them find out what their bugs are without banging their head against the wall for 3 weeks, which is what I tend to do anyway. But that's because, you know, I'm a masochist. But, you know, I'm trying to use RSpec with DragonRuby, so you know I'm crazy.
So I have another question on it's kind of side topic to testing. I don't know if you'd call it testing. It is a form of testing, but I know that there are artificial intelligences that, you know, they're teaching like cars themselves to drive or to do different things. And the AI tries 5 million different combinations to find the right one. So is there a tool that exists, maybe even in the professional developer space, where you can actually put an AI like in charge of a particular agent or your player character and have it basically play the game? And you could have test boundaries that say, navigate the play area at level 1. And for this, you should not exceed this play area and you shouldn't drop below the world and whatever. And basically the AI just iterates, walks all over creation, doing all sorts of things, trying different things. And it basically, you define the bounds at which it's not supposed to go out of. And then if you do, okay, well then if it does, okay, well then you found a bug. So I guess I'm kind of asking that question. I don't know where we're at in the game industry in general, particularly DragonRuby, but I guess that's another future I see, I guess, in terms of testing. And has anyone heard of this or people using it for any purpose like this?
I have definitely seen that is definitely being done by some game development teams. I've definitely seen, I'm not sure if it was game development conference or what it's called, like this very huge thing that's once a year and some talks there. I've definitely seen teams doing that they put an, I don't know, either random walking agent or an agent with some certain, I don't know, probability instructions to do certain actions. I think the examples I've seen was to see how often certain states of the game occur, to get like another kind of view on your current game for game design purposes. That is definitely what I've seen, and that sounded very useful. Like I think it was a half kind of narrative game with many kinds of splits, and see how often certain events actually happen, and if it's something too rare, too unbalanced. And I can definitely see like a random, I don't know, what is that called? What Netflix is doing, like the crazy monkey testing or something?
Chaos Monkey.
Something like that, definitely. Give your agent, of course you have to have written your game logic well, so you can just plug in something else instead of your player logic, but then give it some random inputs every tick and let it run for, I don't know, however, and see if nothing is broken, no invalid state has happened. That's one way, one definitely regression suit you can run always with your other tests.
Yeah, and that
there's no tools for that. I think probably for Netflix this kind of monkey testing or what it's called, there's probably already tools for that you can somehow, hey, give it these API endpoints and it will do it for you. But for games, I'm not sure. Game dev programming space, I think people are very somewhat protective about their stuff still. I mean,
well, there might be products on the market that will probably cost an exorbitant amount of money.
But then having it plugged in, but why not? There's maybe there's even some kind of random guy who defined an open standard, open game character controlling DSL version 1.0, where you have this kind of API, I don't know, like the Docker API or something when open
I mean,
standard develops.
Because I guess I'm just thinking of so many QA people
Mhm.
who work in the game. Basically, they go in and they play the game and they try different things and they constantly work on different builds. And essentially, it would be AI taking over the role of playing the game many different ways.
Mhm.
Let's catch up with chat here. There's some good chat. Storage? Welcome to the stream. Rebuilt. Welcome to the stream. Storage. This has been recommended to me. I'm assuming you're talking about Palantir. But see, Kevin, you got me all confused now.
I'm
never
also
gonna know.
confused now.
Why are you talking about Palantir? Well, because Kevin wrote it, and it has to do with our testing topic. And I figure if I'm going to talk about that, I should talk about it with the person that wrote it, because they'll know more than I do about it. So
Yes.
that's
It's
why.
It's not this kind of dubious I don't know, what is it, an American security company or something? I don't know. There's a company called also Palantir.
Billions of dollar company. Yeah, it's not that.
No, that's not that.
No,
And
no,
I'm
no.
also not talking about, of course, the inspiration there about Saruman's crystal ball. I mean, the inspiration is definitely from there, but it's a tool for DragonRuby that I wrote and
It's
released last year.
this tool.
It's
You can go
it's
check
not
that
the
out.
corporation. I'm not
No,
sure
no, no.
what kind of background this kind of storage issues person is asking from.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I wasn't even aware of that because I don't pay attention to that space. Yeah, Sire, it's just $5 US. I think I may just buy 10 licenses, one for myself. That's very generous, Sire. Okay, I was here because of the shares. The shares of
Maybe on Twitter or somewhere.
Okay. Cool. Well, we're glad you're here. There are AI tournaments for StarCraft. Oh my gosh, that's getting. I'm not sure to be scared of AI or really love it. I'm kind of on the fence there, but my mind keeps going back to T2, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just old and scared about stuff, but it's a little weird. Oh gosh, we're at an hour already. Kevin, thank you so much for coming and joining us. I had a great time. Chat, you were wonderful today. Lots of good chat there. Good questions. Thank you all for that. We're glad you were here. If
Sire says, "All hail the AI overlord."
Yeah, right. Palantir offer an AI platform. I think the YouTube algorithm is confused.
I see.
Good.
Yes.
But anyway,
by the way, I just posted a video in the Palantir channel in the DragonRuby Discord, so check it out later. A little
nice.
preview coming.
Yeah, and if you're watching and you're not part of the DragonRuby Discord, please go join that. It's a fantastic community. I love hanging out in there. Lots of nice people. I met Kevin through there. New friends all over the world. It's fantastic, and everybody's super willing to help you as you learn DragonRuby and game design and stuff. So Cyrus says he'll contact you, Kevin, on Discord about the license stuff. So
thank you.
So we hope you guys enjoyed that. Please, if you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends. We're doing DragonRuby. We've got 3 more DragonRuby shows for Rubber Duck Dev Show. Next week, Amir is coming to talk to us about the future of DragonRuby, things that are coming up, things that he's thinking. So that should be lots of fun. We always love always love having Amir on the show. My God, English. Hi, I'm Chris. I learned you a long time ago. But that should be a great show. And we still have a few spots open for the show on June 29th, which is going to be an open party panel. We're just going to get together, hang out on Zoom and live stream and talk to chat, talk to each other, and just have a good time and celebrate DragonRuby Month. So contact me on Twitter at DuckyDevShow or on the Discord, the DragonRuby Discord or our Discord, or rubberduckdevshow@gmail.com. There's about 800 different ways to contact me. So pick your favorite, contact me, let me know that you want to get on there, and we will set you up. Am I sure I know English? No, I'm not terribly sure that I know English because I screw it up every time I get in front of a camera. In fact, I think Kevin did a much better job with English than me today, and that's not his first language. So, it's, like, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I certainly did. And again, Kevin, thank you very much for taking time from your vacation and your family to hang out with us today. I very much
Thank you for
enjoyed that
having me.
conversation. And I always love talking to you on Discord because, testing. But it's really great to finally meet you in person. That's one of my favorite things about doing this show is getting to meet people. So thank you, chat, again for being here. Shut up, phone. I'm in the middle of stuff. And we hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. I'll be back on Tuesday with some more Cave Lords live programming. And then Thursday, like I said, we've got Amir on. I'm babbling on too much, so we will just say goodbye. And until next time, happy programming.
Happy programming.
Happy programming.